Serious, parents of Reddit, what did you tell yourself you'd never do, but ended up doing, and why? That as parents we'd still make time for ourselves to do things away from being parents. This weekend is our first kid-free weekend in 14 months. We slept all afternoon then watched TV in bed. That is doing something. Sleep is something. And it's glorious. Oh god, I want sleep again. I miss sleep. Send sleep please. Counting to 3 always annoyed me when I heard other parents do it, but I realized it's as much for the parent to calm down as it is for the child to correct their behavior. I've been doing this with my dog for 6 years. I swore to myself I wouldn't ever be the fat lady screaming at her kids in Walmart. If I have offended a few people, I was exaggerating a bit. I don't scream, but I do get very aggravated and snippy with them. I'm not fat, just a tad overweight. 5 feet 3 and 160 lbs. I try my best to be the best mom I can be, but it seems like the monsters in my kids always come out at Walmart. Lol. Before I had kids I would always side-eye the actual fat ladies actually screaming at their kids, and now I understand. I saw you the other day. Teach my kid bad habits. I've struggled with nail biting since as long as I can remember. My nails always look fricked. My fingers hurt. They often bleed. I didn't want my son to go through this. Then, the other day, I spot him working on a hangnail really hard. I take a closer look, and all his cuticles are fricked up. One is red tinged from blood. He's worse than I ever was, and he's only 5. I can't help but think I've modeled that behavior for him, since I wasn't able to quit when he was born. I haven't even been able to quit for 1 hour, let alone a day. Dang. My grandpa told me I was a cannibal for chewing on my nails when I was 6, and I haven't since. Being strict. You go your whole life telling yourself you will be the cool and laid back type. Then it happens and all of a sudden secret police in your own home sounds tempting. Firm is good. You need them to know that when you tell them to come here now they will freaking come there now. You just can't abuse it. All the Santa stuff. I thought we could just saint skip it and emphasize Christmas as a time for family to get together and celebrate being with one another. The minute he was born I thought this kid needs magical crap. He is 8 now and he just had the discussion with me. He laid out his no Santa case with evidence, both scientific and anecdotal. Good kid. I promised myself I'd never lick my finger and wipe my kid's face. Real revenge is growing up and doing it to your parents. But why? Because I said so. Sitting the kids in front of the TV. I also said I'd always read to them every night. Sometimes you just don't have the energy and the convenient option is just much more appealing. It's how I can tell an inexperienced parent from an experienced one, because the newbie sounds like I used to. 0 screens until at least 5. Hahaha as I type this sitting next to my 3-year-old watch Curious George. He woke up way too early at 7:30 this morning. Bribery. Turns out it's particularly effective pre-Christmas or birthday. You can get a good 2 months out of each of them. Poor Mary. Since her kid was born on Christmas, those 2-month periods were the same, so she had to deal with him acting up 10 months out of the year. After having kids, I look at the people with kid leashes and now think, yeah, I understand why. We took our kid to the dog show on a leash. The irony was not appreciated. I told myself I would never, ever say because I said so. Apparently, I can't deal with the question why more than 4,000 times per day. There is only so much logical reasoning you can do with a kid until it breaks down to I told you so end all wise. Got married. My entire life I was opposed to the idea. Then I met my wife and it seemed like a very romantic thing to do. This is me. I'm 24 and I can never see myself getting married. Keep bailing them out financially when they continue to get themselves in trouble by being short-sighted. I told myself that I'd never yell at my kids. Of course, if I'd known back then that I'd have chronic pain that resulted in constant irritability, I probably wouldn't have made such a lofty goal. I also promised myself that I wouldn't be an alcoholic like my dad. Luckily I've held on to that one. Well, if you do let them know it's pain that's upsetting you, not the kids. Let them know it's not their fault. Probably everything. As a young 20-something I, like most young 20-somethings, thought I knew everything there was to know about being a parent. I was that childless friend who always had the advice about what to do. Of course my baby was going to sleep in their crib through the night immediately because I was going to make them. She would only eat homemade baby food from organic produce. No way I would let my baby put my cell phone in her mouth or chew on my glasses in the grocery store. Television was out of the question. Ha 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 ha. I have a 9-month-old. She just started sleeping in her own crib 2 weeks ago. I buy her baby food. There's a reason those companies are still around. You want to suck on my cell phone or glasses? Hey, if you're not having a tantrum, go for it. Why can't you just watch one episode of Baby Einstein so I can do laundry? Oh look, here she comes to interrupt me on the toilet. People, don't be me. Keep your opinions inside where no one can hear them. Because otherwise you get Velcro baby, and you'll love them to pieces but also want them to leave you alone for 5 minutes so you can poop in peace. With 4 girls and 8 grandchildren, my mother has barely been able to pee uninterrupted for 30 years. Using TV as a babysitter, I don't do it often, but Netflix on my iPad gives me 30 minutes of quiet time during breakfast to down my first 2 cups of coffee, so it's worth it. Really, it's not that bad. As long as you're not letting them watch HBO or something, I don't see what the big deal is. I was practically raised by a TV. I have lots of hobbies. I was an active kid teenager. There's a reason so many educational baby shows exist. I said I would never cuss around my child, and I really try not to, but some days are really bad and I'll drop something, kick the corner of the wall etc. And I'll scream frickin' crap. My daughter cracks up every time I yelp in pain or anger 00. Caved and bought the minivan. This was after the 3rd kid in 37 months. Drove it for 4 years. Then got my pride back. There's a reason they sell a bazillion of them. They're so dang practical. So dang practical. Dad confirmed. Cry it out. We had read enough that we were convinced that letting a baby cry was a form of abuse, and we were so sure when he was born that we would be able to weather any sleep issues and that he would eventually figure it out. Well, after 4 months of picking him up, nursing and walking and singing and shushing and rocking him every time he cried until he fell back asleep, and then trying to lay him back down in his crib with surgical accuracy so as not to wake him back up in the process, we were absolutely miserable. And, of course, he was no picnic during the day because he was as sleep deprived as we were. We were convinced he was a problem sleeper and asked our pediatrician if there were any tests we could order or medications we could try. Instead, she recommended that we try just letting him cry. At first, we were offended by the nerve of this so-called doctor recommending a brutal Stone Age technique to enlightened parents such as ourselves, and were all set to switch pediatricians. But after talking to some parent friends who had gone through it and actually reading up on the pro side of the subject, we decided there might be something to this, and to give it a go. After about 3 nights of the Ferber progressive waiting technique, it was nothing short of miraculous to our sleep-deprived minds. He began putting himself to bed without complaint, and he was happy during the day. I always saw parents with those little leashes on their kids and thought, oh my god, that's awful. I'll never do that. Yeah, until I had a little boy who is the next Usain Bolt that is like a nice mix of Tasmanian devil, a Saw Patch Kid and a wet gremlin. So yeah, he will take off in an instant if he's not strapped down in a grocery cart or stroller. His leash is a backpack that buckles across chest and has a removable lead thingy. I feel bad, but god, this kid scares the life out of me every day lol. I have a kid like that. He's 19 now, but when he was little he was fearless and loved to run. Best thing we ever did was to teach him to stop on a dime when we yelled stop. I'm convinced it saved him from being run over in driveways 3 times and from drowning once. Let my kids eat processed sugar and fat. Yeah, that didn't last. We keep under control. A cookie or something once or twice a week, but our older kid does get them. Also TV. Again, we keep it to somewhat reasonable levels, but yeah, I've put in a kids movie so I can clean the house and take a crap in peace. The only part of this I've kept true on is soda. My child doesn't do soda. Will not smoke a cigarette again. Leashes. I thought it was just lazy parenting. Now I have 3-year-old twins with autism. They aren't verbal and don't respond to commands. A leash could save a life in a busy parking lot. I started nice and early and gave up on my strongly held principle of no dummies on our first day out of hospital. I thought they were awful and a clear sign of lazy parenting. First day out of hospital, here the midwife comes to the house and scares the crap out of you with the safe sleeping advice. Look at all the ways you could kill your child. During this she mentioned that research showed having a dummy reduced the risk of cot death. So one was purchased immediately. Luckily, probably because he was born with a poor suckling instinct, he was never really attached to it other than sleeping, so it was easy to stick to the advice about when to get rid of it, and it was gone soon as he turned 6 months old. When I was pregnant, I swore up and down I would never co-sleep bed share. People who recommended it to me would make me so anxious, and I would read so many expert articles about why it was such a bad idea. As soon as our little one showed up, I quickly learned that he had a mind of his own and he wanted to be held all the time while sleeping. After falling asleep with him in my arms on the couch and a few weeks of sleepless nights, I asked some mom friends that I respected and trusted how they survived new parenthood, and every one of them said they bed shared. Ultimately I gave in and got so much sleep and quickly became comfortable with doing it myself. In hindsight, I wished I was more open-minded as a childless person. That being said, I'm glad my strong opinions were challenged and changed, because now I am very open-minded of other parents' choices and my own choices. We never bed shared. I'm a violent sleeper for one, but holy crap, I've known enough folks that did it without issues to not stress over it. Feed my babies formula. I had read the studies. I knew breast milk was best. I just didn't make any. I starved my first kid for a week before the nurse suggested I feed her formula, and it felt like I was a failure. Turns out formula is a lifesaver for those who can't feed their babies naturally. It has made me far less judgmental of others' parenting choices. I said I'd never have kids, but time sure makes fools of us all. My ex and I had an accident. Best accident I've ever made in my life. I call my son my happy surprise. I didn't want kids either, but I wouldn't trade him for anything in the world. Between him and my husband, I feel like I have that little piece I was always missing. Allow my daughter to eat McDonald's. Sigh. It became a convenience thing. It happens very rarely, but it still happens. I try to order the fruit bags rather than the fries, then my daughter steals all of mine. Because I said so, that's why. Why? Have a kid and find out why. Have a beer after the kid goes to bed. Luckily my self-control is still there, so I only have one. Bed sharing with the baby. It's easy to say you won't, until it's 4 AM and you haven't slept yet, because 20 pounds baby won't sleep unless you hold him. I'll never let my baby watch TV. She's chillin' in her bouncer watching Sesame on demand right now. Sesame Street frightened me when I was a child, but I was kind of strange. Here's the deal, most of what people say before they have kids changes when the reality of the situation hits them. I wish I would have understood people when they told me in a few years I would understand. I would not spoil them. I never dream I would only have one. Make so much money. All the number of buck stores and used item shops that would be out there. How many cheap toys are out there? Plus she is really good at it at the time. Why not? Because you can only explain something so many times. Barbie. I had some when I was a kid on the 80s, but once I hit my early 20s was convinced she was a horrible doll. Body image things and whatever. My oldest was gifted the Princess and the Pauper movie with the dolls to go with. I now have 3 girls and almost every Barbie movie, and to be honest I actually enjoyed watching them. Life in the Dream House is legitimately a great show. I promised myself I'd never smoke or drink in high school because I wanted to take care of my body. Turns out sitting inside playing video games your whole memorable childhood doesn't prepare you for the stress of human interaction and the drama that follows suit. I vowed never to sacrifice my career for my kids. When I was pregnant with my first, I promised everyone at my long hours, high stress job that I'd be right back in the trenches with them as soon as my maternity leave ended. I planned for backup care for when my son was sick or my husband, whose job required a schedule outside the usual 9 AM to 5 PM hours, and I both had to work late. I thought I had it all figured out. Then the kid ended up in the hospital with pneumonia, and I had to take days off to stay with him. Went back to work, Things were fine until he came home with pink eye and my backup sitter refused to watch him. Husband and I each take a day. Then I get asked at 5 PM to stay late. The husband is with a client and can't get away. My Sam friend who offered to pick up the kid when I was running late is on the other side of town. And I have to turn down the assignment because otherwise no one's available to get to the daycare by closing time at 6 PM. All this time my co-workers, all of whom are either childless or have wives who stay home with the kids, start grumbling that I'm not dedicated anymore and making playful comments about my sick days. So I ended up leaving that job and working on a freelance basis instead, making, after the savings, on childcare and commuting. Not to mention being home to cook instead of relying on takeout since we're stretched so thin, the same amount and spending more time with the little one. If you'd told me when I was pregnant that I'd have cut back like that, I'd considered giving up, but I'm so much happier now. Because I said so. Sometimes after getting 15 ys deep in a pointless explanation that has become completely unrecognizable from the initial question of why we are taking a bus, you just have to cut it off before you lose your freaking mind. Ask my kids if they want to be spanked. Of course they don't. What a stupid question. Now I realize that the threat works to stop the behavior and I never actually need to do it. Spanking. I've done it once and immediately regretted it. Pretty sure it affected me more than the boy. Coming from a family where we had a church paddle for acting up in service, I swore I'd never spank my kids, becoming more like my father every day. I swore to myself that I'd never let my son play with any type of weapons, guns, knives, swords. The reason? I was threatened by his father when I told him I was leaving him. Threatened to shoot me and the kids. Son was 5 weeks old at that time. Fast forward, at the age of 8 he owned all of the Nerf guns. At age 10 moved on to airsoft. They are not soft in the least. Now at age 14 can tell you all about any type of gun and how to break them down. Sigh. I have failed. That I would never use the TV as a babysitter. I became a parent and I didn't know what to do with my kid 24/7 and I had to find a way to entertain him so he wouldn't be whining and stuff and he wouldn't play with his other toys, so TV it is. Also I can get things done. I thought I wouldn't be co-sleeping, but then I had my son and the only way I could sleep was to have him in my arms, so I found that shortcut than staying up half the night or all night with a crying baby trying to put him to sleep. I didn't want to be sleep deprived. I also thought I would never let my kids eat junk food and candy, but wrong. I started doing it. Just as long as they are not putting on any extra weight, I am not worried. I thought I would let my kids play with anything that can't break and that can't fit into their mouths, but I found out the hard way. They can ruin anything, so we all do mine like a 2-year-old and not share it with them. I will not yell at my kids. Wrong. My mom says that she had decided to never say no to us. That she'd find another way to guide and correct us. It lasted 4 months. Finance a vehicle, and I'm on my way to sign the papers this afternoon. Just don't lease one. You'll be making payments forever and not own a car to show for it. For the luxury of having a new car every couple of years. No, financially worth it at all. Financing to be able to have a car without waiting years to save up when you could be using it is worth it though. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.